My Life as I Remember It, Chapter 3, Part 3, Linden Park. The war was still raging when we moved to Linden Park in La Follette, and Jim received his orders to report for duty in the Army. Most of these events surrounding Jim are lost to me. I cannot remember Jim being at home much. He lived in Baltimore, Maryland for a while, and his stay in the Army probably occurred during those younger times of my life, and he is not a part of those years. There could have been other issues involving Jim, but I do not know what they were, so that part will need to be explained by someone other than me. Arvil Carr, Arlie's husband, was in the Army stationed in the South Pacific. I think he was in New Guinea and was attached to anti-aircraft defense. Arlie lived with us and Judy was born while we lived in Linden Park. Judy was born in a hospital located across from the La Follette Post Office, now referred to as the old La Follette Hospital building. Judy died a few years ago of breast cancer. Occasionally, someone from La Follette who was in the Army Air Force would buzz the city with his airplane. I can remember how disappointed I was when the buzzing ceased and they went on their way. Several times I saw squadrons of B-17s go over La Follette. One day when I was sitting in my first grade class at West La Follette Elementary, I heard an aircraft, and when I looked out the window, a B-25 came over the school just above the treetops. An Army troop train wrecked and fell into the creek between Jellicoe and La Follette. You could see the wreck from Highway 25W, and I can remember seeing the passenger cars lying on their sides in the creek. This accident happened before the war ended, and some of the people thought it may have been sabotage. The investigators said it was an accident because the engineer was under the influence of alcohol, and I'm not completely sure about that story. It was not long before all the houses in Linden Park were occupied. Someone was always moving in, and I had many friends whose names I cannot remember. Most of the people worked at Oak Ridge, and there was lots of activity in our neighborhood during World War II. I can remember one friend, not his name, whose looks stands out above all the others because his nose was flat. Dad said he was born without a nose bone, and that is why he looked the way he did. Snot would run out of his nose and gross me out, especially when we would get into a wrestling match. We were doing something one day and he fell and skinned his nose real bad. He looked awful, and I remember thinking people would think he had really messed his nose up in an accident. His family was somewhat strange and his sister was retarded. I made several of my own toys and can remember I had as much fun with them as I ever did with store-bought toys. One of my favorite toys was made of Spam cans. I punched holes in the top and the bottom of each can. I then tied the cans together at the bottom. I tied a wire to a tree and strung them together so they would slide on the wire. In my mind, it was just like the rope line at Anthrax. I would play for hours loading dirt and pulling them up the tree to dump the cargo. I acted out most of my movies I saw at the Cherokee Theater. I would come home and act out some of the cowboy parts. One day, someone was firing a gun on the cliff that overlooked Linden Park. Each time the gun would fire, I would go into my routine of acting like I was shot and begin to fall like in the movies. A man came by in his automobile just as one of the shots rang out. I went into my routine, and this man came to a screeching halt and ran over to me thinking I had been shot. I can remember thinking that I had done a good job of acting. I loved Western movies, especially Gene Autry and Roy Rogers. I would play for hours singing the songs and pretending I was riding my horse.